Пока остальные люди, остальные компании лет 40 назад концентрировались на внутреннем рынке, Кен Кейт и его компании, его партнеры помогали развиваться компаниям в различных странах, в том числе Азия, Латинская Америка, Европа, Ближний Восток, страны и так далее. Кен Кейта и его партнеры работали в 108 странах мира и поддерживают 13 филиалов в этих странах. Это просто легенда. Я прочитал как-то в одном журнале, что, вот я сейчас даже процитирую, это цитата: «Мало кто знает, но влияние Кена Кейта повсюду». Вот так вот круто. В общем, встречайте на этой сцене легенда австралийского дизайна, да и не только австралийского, а мирового, Кен Кейто.
Good evening. I have a lot of material to show tonight, and I have this magic thing that makes the slides go. But it's here. Thank you. I call my little talk tonight No Boundaries, and it really relates to my life in design, which started in the late 1960s. But in 1970, I started my own company. And since doing that, I've been on this magical adventure, doing something that I love, doing things that I like to do, things that excite me. And I've had a chance to do them all over the world. This is where I live, this is my home. Or at least people in Melbourne think that this is my home. But in reality, I live here. During the course of my career, we've worked in 111 countries. This was never a plan. This was never a set out to start a company that would take me on this adventure. I always think that if life's supposed to be about different things, what better career could one have? What better life could one have? To work with different cultures, different industries, different projects, and every day an adventure. My world's full of wonderful creatures, all with their own nuances. And these creatures all have needs. And that need is a human need to understand who you are, what you believe in, what you stand for, what's fundamental in your world. But so too is the need to communicate that to others. And that's where us, as designers, have a chance to be the translator of other people's stories. Today the world calls a brand. When I started my company in 1970, it was called corporate identity. And then along in the 90s, along came this brand word, which I absolutely loathe. But I think it's still about one simple thing, and that's about gaining recognition. Particularly in a world the size we work in today, where there are literally no boundaries. It was Tom Peters, I don't know if you know who Tom Peters is, he wrote a book some, I guess, 25, 30 years ago called In Search of Excellence. He was a business person. It's easy for designers to talk about why design's good for the world and why we should have it. But to have business commentators that are respected to say things that are good about design is much more potent. And I think this statement from him, branding is so bloody obvious. When one has an identity, life gets a lot simpler. And that's what we try to do for our clients. So tonight I thought I'd take you on a very quick journey through some of the countries that we've worked in. And I've chosen a few projects that might be just a little bit out of the ordinary. Some old, some new, some not so successful, some maybe very successful. In my country, we've worked for pretty much every major organisation. When we started our company, there wasn't a lot of designers in Australia doing what we do today and what we all think is normal. We work for the banks, we work for the television companies, we work for football teams, we work for the post office, we work for cities and locations. I was trying to find a project from home that I thought that might be of interest to you. We don't really subscribe to the sort of usual way that people go about identity programs. We don't believe it's about designing trademarks and driving those down through the organisation and asking everybody to follow a set of rules. Quite the contrary. Because the real chance to have an identity seen is to understand the issues inside the company, how they're going to use the identity and to solve those problems. Ultimately, it will result in some outcome of a trademark. I always think it's a bit like writing a book. You don't actually start by designing the front cover. You might just write the chapters first. We had an opportunity to work with our national airline. And unusually for us, we were invited to design the interiors of the aircraft and the lounges internationally. Of course, the first question that I had was what part of the brand needs to be represented in this. In a 5-minute conversation, we came to the conclusion, together with the CEO and the marketing director, that what the airline was really about was about the best of Australia. And it wasn't about taking the trademark inside these environments, but rather, how could we take hold of millions of dollars worth of operational things and turn those into brand things? I don't think I've come across a company that's got too much money in their marketing budget. Everybody seems to be short of money to build the brand. But when you think about where brand manifests itself, the real opportunity is in the operational things. So in this case, we had a chance to design fabrics for seats, we had a chance to design carpets for the aircraft. We said, how can we take possession of the country? If Australia is the best thing that the airline has to offer, how could it own the country? And pretty simply, it was the only company in Australia that actually saw Australia from 35,000 feet. So it was a unique view of wonderful images that we as designers wouldn't create or couldn't create, but we could find. What this did was empower the company and all the people that worked in it to understand what the brand was about. We used these photographs to create seat fabrics in all the classes in the aircraft. And when people on board the aircraft were asked, we see you've got new seats in the aircraft, the staff would respond with, do you understand this was designed based on the rivers of outback Western Australia? And they would talk about the country, they would talk about the airline, and they would talk about the brand. It had nothing to do with the trademark. Every part of the aircraft was driven by different elements from Australia. You'll notice that we don't even use the word or the name of the company because they already had a trademark that was well known. So when we had to colour code the classes, it was simply find the best blue for first class, find the best red for business class, find the best green for economy. And you'll note the lack of the word economy on the tag, because I think everybody that sits down the back knows where they're sitting. It made it very easy. Anytime there was something new, we had somewhere to go that wasn't the trademark, or trying to make a new version of the trademark, or trying to extend the trademark. But we had a whole language to develop fabrics, wool fabrics, carpets, napkins, blankets, and so on. Since 1973, we've worked in Asia, we've worked in Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and so on. Many, many projects, and some of our greatest learnings as a company came out of Asia, I think, and continue to do so. One of the questions we always have when people say they want to be different is to say, how genuinely do you want to be different? And most of the time, they want to be different the same as somebody else. Particularly in Asia, where there's a real, I believe, lack of imagination. It's a thing they struggle to imagine anything, really. It's imagination is show me a picture and I'll tell you I can imagine it. I love this quote. Always remember that you're absolutely unique, just like everyone else. Which really is what it's largely about in Asia. For 15 years, we consulted with a company in Taiwan, a company called BenQ, produces projectors, cameras, telephones. When we started working with them, they'd already developed an identity program, but it wasn't working. And we were challenged to make them look different, but don't change anything. We were unable to change the trademark, we were unable to change the colour of the brand. So we looked at the competitors. Now these are the competitors to this company, and all we've done on this chart is to remove the trademarks. Remember, these companies all make virtually the same things. And you know when you go into an electrical store just how different a television set will look, how different a mobile phone will look, how different any of that equipment looks. You notice that the typography, unless you're a typographical expert, they're all basically the same. The photographs of the lifestyle things are all interchangeable, and you can see what a wide range of colours have been used in order to look different. This is what's scary. We can do this with almost any set of companies. If you look really closely, they all follow the leader. And where's the market leader going? The market leader's going somewhere else. And we'll drag the people along with them. Of course, what had BenQ done? They'd chosen a colour that was almost the same. They picked the most popular typeface. In the other set, there were two exactly the same that used Bill Sands. They had also followed this. So make it look different, but don't change anything. We said, what about this butterfly? And they said, in frustration with the program not working, they took the butterfly, marketing team took the butterfly out of that photograph that you see there and started to use it. So we said, we'll kill this off, we'll get rid of it. Then we noticed the differences in the butterfly, and we also noticed that the forms of the butterfly were much softer. It was a much softer language than the technical things that other companies were using. We knew that in the retail situation, we were going to look exactly the same colour-wise, and yet we couldn't change the colour. What we did was inject textures from the butterfly into the colour to make ourselves at least different in a textural sense. We then discovered we could go and get the colour they'd rejected, which was the pink. And this gave us basically a trademark we could do anything with. It was totally flexible. Those long shop fronts that are difficult to handle, we could take 100% of the space. We weren't putting a funny little trademark shape onto the front of these things. It also meant we could remain purple, not change that. We could go and get other colours and put that with the situation, and ultimately we developed a language that broke right out of where they'd been. It gave us the chance to distinguish the different marketplaces. It gave us the chance to talk directly to different audience groups. Of course, this was pretty simple to apply. This photograph was sent to me by the marketing team. They put this trade show up in Las Vegas. And they simply wanted to know if they'd done it correctly. And it struck me that this does what everybody asks, and that is, if you design something for a particular country, how can it be appropriate elsewhere? So how can something designed for here be appropriate to China? Because brands need to react to the best situations to take advantage of those things. We cut this in half. This is how the brand behaves in China. Very colourful, very powerful, all singing, all dancing. If you walked into a store in Milan, it would look more like this. Same brand, behaving differently according to circumstance. Nothing to do with the trademark. They had an opportunity to sponsor the Euro Cup 2005. And while they couldn't say a lot about the brand, there was an opportunity to get a 60-second piece of video onto pretty much all the screens across the planet, but they couldn't say who they were in terms of name or trademark. This 60-second piece of video allowed them to have on screen the whole 60 seconds, basically a connection to the identity. There is a bit of sound with this, but we can do without. But you can see from this that they've changed conversations. They're not talking about technology, they're not talking about mobile phones, they're talking about soccer. And yet the brand can be there 100% of the time. This got played on screens in shopping centres, electrical stores, in places where they could seriously create brand awareness. There we go, it's not going to get out of this. Just suffer through this with me. We're in an office in New Zealand, and I love my office in New Zealand. It was a really predictable design office when we partnered with a couple of people there. And they designed very nice annual reports. Not things that would have your jaw drop on the floor. They've worked now, it's changed from an annual report office to a major brand company. One of the things is finding a language of your own. And recently we've been engaged to work on a thing called WOW, World of Wearable Art. It's a wonderful opportunity to engage with a lot of creative people who really do find ways to express themselves. One of the things about this is that no trademark will ever be as powerful as the language that these garments speak and the ability to communicate. That's it? No, it's not. These are some images from some pieces of video we've made recently, and the print material that went out. It's been about creating worlds for these creatures to live in and to find a story that resonated around the event. One of the things that all companies and all industries try to do is to connect with the communities they want to communicate with. And we had an opportunity with this is good Russian technology, but very bad operators from Australia. We did. Yeah, it's going on its own. Can I go back? I can. The Wellington Airport is probably the smallest airport in the world, I think. It's basically a tin shed in the middle of nowhere, and they will hate me saying that. But then Australians always say bad things about New Zealanders. We were talking about the request from the client was to design a trademark for the airport. And I said, my God, this place is so small, if we design a trademark, no one will ever see it, because there wasn't too many places it could go. So we had this idea that we needed to use anything in the airport we could use to communicate the personality and the identity of the airport. And you can see that that was their identity. This slide here talked about the most notable thing in the city. It's probably the world's most windy city. Everything blows much harder. I mean, people talk about Chicago, but Wellington is much more dangerous. If you look on the internet and look for the most dangerous aircraft landings, they're all in Wellington. The wind howls, and what we noticed in this was that the personality that the wind gave us was something we wouldn't find in a trademark. We had that sense of freedom, we had a sense of celebration, we had a sense of drama, we had a sense of humour, but basically it was a very live thing. And we said, if we could take this and use it. So the guys in the office pretended that the words Wild at Heart were set in Helvetica, and the wind had come along and done something to it. And instead of designing a trademark, we went to the government and we said, maybe the stamp that you get could not be contained or constrained by the circle or the square or those things that they normally do. They didn't think it was a very good idea, by the way, but we liked it. Instead of a trademark, what we did was design an illustrative style that we could apply to the airport and all those things in it. This gave us a chance to take the local language and put it with the airport language, which we just couldn't change. Very simple things, but we could take possession of things that were there very simply. Ladies, you've never seen inside the men's room. This is normal. I think this is probably a pretty radical international departure sign. I don't think you see too many that the airports put up anywhere around the world. Taking possession of big grey buildings with just small additions to make them look like they were blowing away. And when they had carpet that had been worn thin but didn't have budgets to replace it, we screen printed images on the carpet and people started walking around those areas. It became very boring when they put the new carpet down. All my slides are going on their own, guys. We do a lot of work in the Emirates. We've done some major work there. Everything from aerospace centres to oil companies to the world's largest airport. cross-section of bits and pieces. It really started to make us wonder about how we thought about our clients and what they were thinking. And anybody that's been to Dubai will understand that the people of Dubai are fiercely Arabic, and at the same time want to be citizens of the world. And it's a very strong duality of personality that comes out of there. We had a project to work on the world's largest airport. Anybody been to the Dubai airport? Some people, right. If you can imagine that 40 kilometres away from the main airport, there is this development. The main airport's 14.8 square kilometres. This is 148 square kilometres. 6 parallel runways and cities. The problem they had was that each of the components within this development were often chasing after the same piece of money. So they were actually competing. It was like a family of brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles trying to get the same thing. And yet the government really wanted to present it as one single thing. We also knew it had to be international, and we also knew it had to be Arabic. I'll take a second to tell a little story here. I was lucky enough that we worked with the royal family there. And I was very nervous because in the presence of royalty you're about to present a project, particularly when you haven't told them that you want to change the name. So we go to the meeting, and I was fortunate enough to get the member of the royal family that was there. I said, "What do I call you?" He said, "Look, we really love you being here and being part of this. And you're our friend and you're part of the team. And we really welcome you. Just call me Your Royal Highness." So in the meeting I said, "Your Royal Highness, we want to change the name." And there was a horror on 18 faces. All the minders were really, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And I won't tell you the story about this, but we changed the name to World Central. And he said, "What do you want to call it?" And I said, "World Central." And he said, "It's incredibly Arabic." I like it. With World Central, we did some research into sort of patterns and fabrics that originated some time ago. And we found this little central object, and we found that if we just reinterpreted what was there, we would be very comfortable. So in reality, what we did was to reinterpret it, and then for each of the divisions, so that they could work in harmony but have their own identity, this is a quick part of the presentation. Stop. It was pushing the button. This was a bit of a family. It really gave them a chance to be who they were and have their own business within the structure. On the subcontinent, we've had some incredible experiences in India and Pakistan, working on television stations, airlines, things like that. What I'm going to show you now is a project that never came to fruition. We got to painting planes, and when the government declared that they were millions and millions and millions of dollars in debt, they stopped the project, which was very disappointing to us. But the interesting thing about this project is, and I'm going to show you this now, everything I'm going to show you existed. We really didn't invent anything particularly new, and yet we were able to change the whole thing quite radically. The airline's position was that they wanted to celebrate life. And the week before, they'd run an aircraft off the tarmac and killed 106 people. So it was not a good start. This symbol had existed for a long time, back around sort of, I think even as back as far as the 20s or 30s. And one of the things I noticed, whoops, it's got a mind of its own, it's great. This aircraft was an aircraft out of the 80s, 90s, I think. And at that point they got rid of it and got rid of that symbol that I showed you. You can see it on the tail there, the centaur. And I said to them, why did you get rid of the centaur? And they said, well, we don't really know. Everybody really liked it, which was very strange. But it turned out a design company had rationalised this centaur into the shape you see there on the right-hand side of the screen. And so the aircraft look like this. Now, India's probably the most culturally complex country that I've ever worked in. They celebrate different things on different days. There's a celebration every day of the year. Religiously, culturally, behaviourally, they're different all over the country. The thing was, how did we pull this together? And what did we actually do with this? My little clicker is very... We said to them, first of all, bring back the centaur, and we fiddled with it a bit, but basically the centaur was the centaur. We noticed also that the airline flew the same routes as everybody else. And plenty of red airlines, they're all essentially the same. Except when I think of India, I don't think of corporate red. I think of what's going to come next. Thank you. Red in India is a passionate thing. It's not corporate, not by any stretch of the imagination. What we did was say, let's celebrate the colour red. Let's go as far towards orange as we can. Let's go as far towards purple or brown as we can. Let's celebrate. Let's make it a celebration of the colour. The other thing that we noticed, of course, is that unlike most societies, colour is in total reverse to societies in Western culture. The people wear the colour. There's no colour in the background at all. In my city, it's black dresses for the girls. Well, not just the girls sometimes. But blue suits, black dresses. You never find them wearing outlandish colour. Yeah, this is kind of a really interesting point because it made the whole thing quite different. I have no idea how I'm changing these slides. The celebrations are always colourful and they're always exciting. So colour was a very big part of it. And we knew if we wanted to understand what were the colour of celebrations, all we had to do was find a landscape that had only people and no background. So this gave us a colour set of celebratory colours. Now we also knew that to bring the people together, we had to find some way of recognising all these cultures and all these religions. We noticed in the garments that people wore that there were these patterns, and we talked to a cultural expert. We said, is there any way that we can pull these together and attribute them to different parts of the country? Stop. So in seeing these patterns, we thought, right, let's do the first design thing and let's try and bring these into some order, some sort of cultural order. This is very annoying. Thanks, guys. This is a really good story. Okay, guys, this is really embarrassing.
Ken, you can, Ken, this is Alexander. Hey, I'm here. You can show us some, and we are click slide. Sorry for, okay. Sorry for our Russian technologies. You know, this is Russia.
Operator.
Okay.
Let's go to the next one. And the next one. So we map these against the country and change these to black and white and put them back together as a map, and we created what we call the fabric of India, where we joined as many of the cultural symbols together as we could get into one thing. We made this big piece of fabric. And it literally had hundreds of images in it. It meant that if we wanted to talk about a particular area of India, we could pull it forward and make it work like that. And we said, all right, now we've got this, what are we going to do with it? So we said, what would the Indians, that wasn't a segment, that is, we said, it's not how we would apply it, it's how would they apply it. And so we just simply put it on the aircraft, walked back the centaur. We managed to have an aircraft that really embraced the people of India. I noticed on one flight, we were flying from one city to the other, and there was on the screen, you know, the screen in the cabin, and I was looking at the screen and it said, there is no image on this screen, which I didn't really need to know. It was a nice piece of type though. Europe, we've done everything from film titles to the World Trade Center in Barcelona to shopping centres, into Mexico, USA and Mexico. Wonderful project in Tijuana where we had a chance to decorate 2.5 kilometres of border wall and the canal and a few other bits. Down to South America, television stations and airlines and development projects. I think one of the important things when you're working cross-culturally is to try and understand the language and the symbols that mean something to those cultures. And we were working with the National Airline of Uruguay, and I was kind of trying to look for something that would tell me about Uruguay. And I looked and it said that Uruguay translated meant a river of colourful birds. Now, I don't know if you can think of a more romantic notion for an image for an airline than a river of colourful birds. So, again, consulting people within that area, what birds are present on the river plate between Argentina and Uruguay, and we figured if we could understand that, then we could create a river of colourful birds, and then we would put them on the aircraft and make them different colours. And when all these were parked on the tarmac, of course, we ended up with a river of colourful birds. Easily understood by everybody. There was no explanation needed as to what it meant or why it was there, and culturally it was incredibly appropriate. I want to talk to you about a project that's been an absolute passion of mine and probably one of the most exciting things I've been involved in. We do these days a lot of work in China, which is the new frontier. And for me, it's incredibly exciting. We have a chance to work on some really wonderful projects with companies that are really starting to develop. But we know it's about the relationship, and in Asia, it's incredibly difficult to form trusting relationships. And we all know, if we look at the best work that any of us have done as designers, the best work always comes from the best relationship. It always comes from the most trusting relationship on both sides. This is my favourite client. He would die. I took this photograph in a meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I've worked with this guy for 8 years, and we've never been able to speak directly. He doesn't speak English, I don't speak Mandarin. And yet somehow we've had a developing relationship. He runs a company called Tang. These were the history of his identity for his organisation before we came along. Tang translated means the people who know bees. All his products were generated by bees. Propolis, royal jelly, honey, pollen products. And the reason that he wanted to move the identity from the one you see on the bottom was that he was about to introduce products generated by plants. So a little bit of almost Chinese medicine. He also had 2 grand dreams. One of them, still does, one of them was to arrest diabetes in China. 120 million diabetics in China, 200 million by 2020. The second one was to make the world aware of how important the bee is to our survival. They say that if the bee was eliminated from the planet, we wouldn't last more than 4 years. Typical products from this company. We knew the project was to really take it from being a bee to being plants. We knew it was about the spirit of the bee, and we really couldn't lose the bee. So instead of this symbol, we redesigned it to look like this. This was the start of the relationship, that he saw that maybe he could trust us a little bit. It's in the company's headquarters. So we developed a language around the bee, of the bee and the bee garden. And some of the products that we designed, containers, so a pill package, for instance. We're always curious, and he said to us that we had to have yellow and black stripes for all the bee products. We said, oh. And we said, bees aren't yellow and black, they're all sorts of colours. And the stripes aren't the way. The stripes aren't the way that you see them in cartoons. They're not even, they're not the same width. But they could vary. So we could have them soft, we could have them hard, we could change the spacing. We also noticed that they're made up of little hairy things, so little textures and things like that. So instead of doing this, what we did was we grabbed the textures from the bees, put them into the stripes, so we could actually register yellow and black stripes as a trademark. Then we could change the proportion of the stripes. Then we could apply them to the packages. And we designed these caps that go on all the products that are kind of like bee stripes, so we get an integration of labels to bottles to total integration. It's working really well, guys. It meant also we didn't have to be yellow and black, because we all of a sudden had a system that fitted the mould but really broke away from it. So the honey packs. They also had crystallised honey, and so we were able to use our bees to create new images for. And the pollen products, again, one day Mr. Lee, I shouldn't call him he's this fantastic guy. He said to me, I want to put a museum in every store. And he said, I want to change the display every week. I said, you can't do that. It'll never happen. I said, maybe if we did some posters you could put up and pull down. And he said, yes, okay, let's look at that. And he gave me a list of 67 facts about the bee. Absolutely amazing things that I had no idea how or why it could work. So, lacking in originality, I went back to him and said, every poster, we're just going to put a bee on it. But we'll design the bee to reflect the subject matter. So this particular image was about how the bee was the link in the ecological chain. So it was animals, fish, things like that. This was about honey that was found that was 2,000 years old in Egypt and was still fresh when they pulled it out of the tomb. This was about a Chinese princess who used bees for beautification. This was about how bees work 24 hours a day to make honey. Propolis, gathering pollen from different flowers. 67 bee facts became 75 or 70, something like that, different images of the bee. We've since had a chance to animate these images and create different stories and narratives around the same thing. Recently, we've been developing a series of cosmetic packs. These are for face masks, and they're very big in China. And these are liquor products. I feel like Marcel. So we stop there for a second. So that's the kind of second part of the company. The third part of the company was this drive to arrest diabetes, and we know that's about blood cell management. And we were trying to work out how we would communicate this. Does anybody know, this blue symbol at the top here is the international symbol for diabetes, which I think is the best kept secret on this planet. Does anybody know that? Me neither. So we developed the language, and he really wanted to put crosses on this because it was semi-medical, and we said no crosses, so we just put the B back on again. And then we were able to use the language to describe the content of the products. And we're also able to use it in communication, so we're able to make videos to describe the 5 things that people had to do to be mindful of diabetes. So food products and things like that, how much food to eat. One day through the translator, he said to me, what do you think of this? I said, it's very big. He said, no, what do you really think? I said, it's really boring. And this was the proposed new factory buildings and headquarters for staff and things like that. And he said, I think it's boring to fix it. So, are there any architects in the room? I'm probably about to upset you. So he said, go away, think about this. Think about this as 3 big boxes and fix it. Also in the back of my mind was the idea that he'd always wanted to have a museum dedicated to the bees. So I was sitting on the tarmac in Beijing and the flight was delayed 20 minutes and I made a kind of page of little scribbles. And I got back to the studio and we put the plan into action. So I went, we have 3 brand languages, why don't we use those? So we kind of thought of the idea of changing these into materials. And we said, why don't we make it look like this? And we put the little golden hive in the middle there, and I said, you know, if you ever have a museum, maybe you could do something like put this little sort of golden hive in the middle. So these are the renderings. He said, okay, let's do it. This is the real thing. This is one of 3 buildings that's totally covered in this material. This is one of the facades. And you can see the positive, negative change when we light it at night. This was the first night that we illuminated one of the buildings, standing in the middle of the freeway looking at this guy. Isn't this wonderful, the cars? All these holes that made up the graphics were all done by hand, every side of every building, because the computer programs are always going to look like computer program dots. So they vary in scale and textures. The beehive was sitting there and he said, I really like it, why don't you build it? And I thought, really? The frustrated architect, here's the chance. So we had this kind of idea that it should be a 24-hour-a-day museum, and even when they closed the doors, that people could learn things about the bees. And the plinths you see in front there have beehives at the back of them on the top, so the bees make honey at night. So there's a chance to generate honey on the site. We went nuts trying to work out how to get all these pieces to fit on top of the thing, so we had to find some engineers. It was pretty cool. So the suggestion was to go ahead, and he took it to the council, he took it to the local government, and they said to him they wouldn't let him build it to the highest point. They would only let him build it to the line that you see 2/3 of the way up, which he commented on by saying, it looks like a Chinese grave. Like this little mound, you know, when you fall over. So I said, why don't we use the car park? Why don't we just get our height back and we go down to the car park? He said, no, yes. So then the next thing was, we said, and then, oh, by the way, then he got the height approved. So all of a sudden we had a museum that had doubled in size, basically. And we had 4 floors. And I kept trying to work out how to get between the floors. So I thought, I shouldn't have to work this out. Let's get the bee to work this out. So we're thinking about how the bee goes from the hive to the flower and back to the hive. And then we learned all this about the wings and how fast they beat and where the noise comes from and how that works. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if these bee-shaped, these wings, could be platforms? And then we would actually be able to make the flower. We could make a connection between the hive, the bee, and the flower. And so we designed it like a spiral staircase. Oh, I didn't take my other rendering. So what we had to work out was how to get from ground level to the entrance, which we wanted to put in the basement, so that when people entered the museum, they would literally fly through the space on these platform wings. This is the structure as of about 2.5 weeks ago. And they're just starting to put the hexagons on the outside of the building, you can see here. This is pre-Christmas, so this is, what is it now, about 9 months ago. One of the things we wanted to do was to create an experience for people when they arrive, to make them feel like they could be the bee. So how could we make them feel smaller than they were? So we developed this canyon to go down into the basement and enter the museum on the lower level. It's a pretty intimidating canyon. And this will be covered ultimately in graphics. This is kind of a bit of a journey. It's a bit about the Einstein theory about bees disappearing from the planet. So when you reach the bottom, you're confronted by these giant bees. So you're kind of compressed in space, got these big bees. And when you enter, you walk onto a bed of flowers, but the flowers are gigantic. And so you've got a chance to hover over the space. So these are some renderings of the interiors. Obviously don't exist at the moment. This is the kind of pollen section. On the walls there are more of these bees that change and reconfigure. I don't know if you know that bees always build, anywhere in the world, bees build their hives to exactly the same thickness, every time. It's pretty amazing. I haven't measured them personally, but yeah. So these are some of the platforms and the galleries through the space. In the main section, there's a giant sculpture of a hive. So people can stand. This is not a signal. So people could stand inside the hive and be part of this support system for the bees. Some of the images. It's a good way to do this speech. It's good. This is the sales area for the pollen products in the main building. The museum, of course, brings opportunities to have product design for it. So we've developed a whole series of products. And this is a recipe book. And the images in here aren't particularly recipe-like, as you would know in a recipe book. I think today is a really interesting time for designers and design. I think for business today, designers moving to beyond the function, beyond the identity project. But it's as clients are looking for difference, as companies are looking to be different from their competitors, the one way of doing that is through design. And it's not just making it look different, it's about engaging the senses, it's about making it high touch, high feel, and a lot more emotive than we've seen in the past. And we've got a willingness, I think, from business today that's moving in that direction because they know the companies that are doing it successfully. Because design is the story, design is the narrative for products and services. It's where designers can make a serious impact in business. we've just, I think, passed through an era of left brain. The computer programmers, the writers of the script, it's all been incredibly lineal. And those right brain parts of the profession have been marginalised. It's always been an unnecessary evil. If we really need a designer, can't we do it ourselves? There's never been a want to truly embrace design, but it's here. And I think we're about to live in, I think, a couple of decades where design will be incredibly important to business. And it's going to be a bit of left brain, a lot of right brain. I just need to be 20 years younger to enjoy it, but it's coming. These things are always learning experiences, and I've learned too. Thank you very much.